Hello, everyone. My name is Sumaya Khan, and I'm the Outreach Coordinator with Minaret Foundation, where our focus is multi-faith and civic engagement for the Muslim community. I am here today with Reverend Karin Liebster. She's going to talk to us about the Evangelical Lutheran Church and her job and how she works there and how this church is different from other Christian denominations. So we're just going to jump right in. Reverend Karin, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yes, hello, good morning, everyone. It is nice to be with you. I am Karin Liebster. I was born and raised in Germany and came here as a young ordained pastor to the United States in 1993. That's a long time ago. That's 27 years ago. I'm pastor now here in Houston at Christ the King Lutheran Church. Pastor of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, which we say for short is the ELCA. And at Christ the King in the Rice Village near Rice University, I am responsible for faith formation. That is everything that has to do with education for adults, for children, for youth. We have a youth director as well, so we work very closely together with the Sunday school. And so my role in the staff is associate pastor. We have another pastor with us, the senior pastor. Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to jump right in. So from my understanding, Evangelical Lutheran Church is a type of Protestant church. Is that correct?
Yes, it is a type of Protestant church. That's very nice. So Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, let's first start with the word Lutheran. Lutheran comes from the name of Martin Luther. And Martin Luther was a historical person in the 15th and 16th century, and he started the whole Reformation, the Protestant Reformation of the church. So Martin Luther, 1517 is like a big date. So we had a 500th anniversary of the Lutheran Church 3 years ago that was celebrated very widely in the whole world, and we tried to do a big bash as well over here. So Protestant, right? The word Protestant in itself is already interesting. Why would you call a church Protestant? What are we protesting? And right, because all of the churches that are not Roman Catholic really fall under the term Protestant. And so what are we protesting? That was actually a derogatory labeling about the people who were following Martin Luther, because they were protesting the organization and at that time the messaging of the Roman Catholic Church. They really had trouble with that. So that is where the word Protestant comes from. So we were the first ones to protest, and therefore all of the Protestant churches really come from this time. Not only the Lutheran, but also the Reformed churches. That started about the same time in southwestern Germany and in Switzerland. And Martin Luther himself lived in Saxony. That's a little bit in Germany, on the upper eastern side of the country. Wittenberg, like an hour and a half south with a fast train from Berlin. That's where that little place Wittenberg is. Yes, so all the other churches that are not Roman Catholic or Orthodox grew out of these two big movements. Yeah.
So are all those other churches that grew out of those two big movements, are they all referred to as Protestant, or it's just
the Methodist Church and the Anglican Church and the Presbyterian Church, also the trans-denominational churches that do not belong to one of these old denominations, they would still fall under the denominator of Protestant. Because what they are not, they're not Roman Catholic and they're not Orthodox.
That's so interesting. I never realized that. So can you tell me a little bit more about the Evangelical Lutheran Church and the word evangelical in there?
Right. Yes, the word evangelical. There is a Greek word hidden in it and that's the Greek word for good news. And so what we wanted when this church was formed out of some Lutheran churches that we had in the United States, we wanted to, in 1988, we wanted to retain the word evangelical because of the context of the good news. We wanted to keep that in our name. And also because in German and probably also in the Scandinavian languages, which were some of those were the first churches, Lutheran churches founded here in the United States, they had that in their name. They didn't call themselves the Protestant Lutheran Church. They called themselves the Evangelical Lutheran Church because that simply means Protestant in German or in the other languages as well. So these are the two. But so people sometimes ask me, well, why you are not like an evangelical church that I know, right? You're not a fundamentalist church at all. And I say, no. So we're, I think that in the core, the message of the saving grace of Jesus Christ is the same, but with the evangelical trans-denominational movement, there comes a very strong drive and urge to proselytize and to make sure that if I know what salvation is and I have it, it is my obligation to proselytize as many people as possible to save them for Jesus Christ and to save them from hell and destruction and all that. And that is not a claim that we have or something that we would do. We would, if you hear someone say, have you accepted Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, your personal Lord and Savior, that does not reflect our understanding of evangelical, because, and I'll talk about it a little bit later. It is nothing that I can do to accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. That's a movement that goes the other way around. God actually is active in this, and it's not my work that I do. So that's a big difference. I don't know whether that comes across.
Okay, so in the other evangelical churches that we might know of,
right.
Focus is on what we can do personally and personally.
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
And other than the Evangelical Lutheran Church, are there a lot of other types of evangelical churches or churches that use evangelical in the name?
There are other churches that are Lutheran. Actually, there is a whole group of Lutheran churches. I looked it up yesterday just for curiosity. There are about 40 Lutheran church bodies in the United States. Most of them are really, really tiny. The big ones that we do want to mention are, where is it? The Lutheran Church Missouri Synod and the Wisconsin Lutheran Church or a synod. See, I know them so little that I have to look up their names here on my notes. Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Church and the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And both these churches are present here in Houston with practicing congregations. Absolutely, all these are historical developments, and mostly the reason for them splitting from other church bodies and keeping their own polity and ways of practicing their faith. It has to do really with their love for the tradition, how they understand it, and their own history and their ethnic origins also sometimes. So there are things they just don't want to give up, and they want to cherish those and continue to carry them on.
Okay. I actually have a quick question for those who may not know. When you say like Gulf Coast Synod, what does that word synod mean?
Oh, yes. So we are organized in 3 levels in the church, in the ELCA. We have our individual congregations. And then we have a regional level, and that is a synod. And then we have the church-wide, the nationwide level, and that is then the headquarters with our presiding bishop. And so we have a bishop who in our region, and that is the Gulf Coast, Texas, Louisiana. So all the, like from south of Houston a little bit, and then you go all the way. I have to do it this way, I think, for the viewers, all the way over to Louisiana, to New Orleans is where our bishop is supervising the congregations.
Okay, so you guys is all of the Evangelical Lutheran churches area, all
ELCA churches in this geographical area are in connection with the Synod office. Yes,
So how does that work exactly? Is it like day-to-day stuff the church handles on their own, and then more bigger picture stuff comes under the bishop, or how does it work? How is it divided?
Well, in our polity, the bishop does not have jurisdiction. The bishop does not give us legislation and demands where he or she tells us this is how we're doing this as a church now. Mm-hmm. The authority of the bishop's office resides in the wisdom and in the really that's what it is, in the wisdom of the bishop. And what is clear is that if we look at mission support, at outreach, mm-hmm. at helping in disasters, mm-hmm. In supporting people who want to study theology, in channeling finances into the top level as well, and all those things, it is just very prudent to have a central office. Yeah. So that not all congregations would do their own, and we would be very much less effective.
Okay, so like a spiritual guidance.
Very important. Very important. The bishop's office also leads the calling of pastors. So when let's say my neighboring congregation, the pastor is retiring or has taken another call, then the bishop's office has a specialized person who helps a congregation find a new pastor.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. That would be so helpful if we had something like that in the Muslim.
Oh yeah, I tell you, it's really cool.
Yeah, and that's very cool that it extends all through Texas and Louisiana, like across states. Is very, very cool. I wanted to end on just a question about what does being Evangelical Lutheran mean? So what does it mean to you personally? And then what does it mean generally?
All right. So the core of our message is, as Evangelical Lutherans, that we're saved by God's grace. And that, so let me explain that a little bit. We believe that we are made right with God by grace. And we're not made right with God by anything that we can do or accomplish, that we work for, but it is that God is in relationship with us is entirely God's free act. It is an expression of God's passionate will and love to be in connection with creation, humanity. And so God has decided to come close to me as a human being, to us, all humanity as human beings, because God decided so. And therefore, God has saved me by grace so that I am free to serve neighbor, and I have peace with God, and I have peace with my neighbor as well, by the grace of God. There is a very classical Lutheran formula by which we say that, and that is something that like everybody has to know, every confirmation student, every child has to learn this basically. Justification by grace through faith. There's a lot in there. So justification is that word that talks about being made right with God, right? Because we are human beings, we are bound to our human condition, which is a way of saying that we are fallible and sinful, right? But we do want to be in relationship with God. And how can that work? Well, it doesn't work by us working hard to please God, but it is God, by grace, who comes to us and decides to forgive us our limitations and our fallibility and our sinfulness, so that we actually can be in a relationship of trust and love, and that we actually can see who God is. And so this is justification, that God has decided to make us right with God. And it is by grace, because it is undeserved. We can work as hard as we want, and we will never be able to please God, because we're just not able to, right? We're always coming short of what my best intentions are. But God gives us justification undeservedly as an overflowing, abundant gift. And that is then, and so this goes into all of our theology. So the question is, what about the cross then? Well, in Jesus Christ, God came so close to us in a human being so that we would really know who God is and trust God. And on the cross, in the crucifixion, our God, or the same God, suffered all of the sinfulness and the evil that has ever been committed by people, but also has been suffered by people. All that God takes on God's self in the cross. And the cross is the same place where God also decides to raise new life. And so that would be the resurrection, to come out of that depth and that cruelty that humanity is, into a life of hope and new life and new beginnings and resurrection. And that is where we're based on, so that we can actually live a life, that we have the promise that we can actually be people who are whole and who are trusting and who have a positive outlook into life and into the world, and can be participants in society, and with our families and so forth.
Okay.
I don't know whether that really was helpful or makes sense. If I look at what God has done for me, I am so humbled that all I can do is to respond and turn to God in love and by serving my neighbor. That's how that works.
Okay. So that was actually going to be my question, is what's the role of the individual then in that relationship that you have with God? Is it just to prior?
So we live out of gratitude all day long. We are just expelled into the world to give thanks for the gift that has undeservedly been given to us. And that's how we live full lives. Lives of hope, of encouragement and not being discouraged. And even the faith, you can see these things, of course, you can understand this only if you are a person of faith, right? If you're not a person of faith, you don't see this, you don't know this. And even faith is a gift itself. I cannot force myself to be, sometimes my faith is weak. And I know people who tell me that they're losing their faith in this time, for example, right? But that's not a problem, because we can trust that God will come back with a gift of faith to us. We're just right now, legitimately depressed or discouraged or sad or are full of doubt and questions. But God will come back with that gift of faith. That will never really go away. And that little plant, that little shoot is always there. And then we know again, and we know that we never got lost. God never dropped us. And that's how we can live a life. And that's what is important to us. What's the time, by the way? Are we still? Yeah, we have a little bit of time left. For me, as a Christian in the world, what that does, it gives me a lot of freedom. It liberates me to serve. We have in the ELCA a phrase that goes like this: God's work, our hands. So we do God's work in the world. That is a way of serving. And the Lutheran Church is actually really known for their big organizations in disaster relief, in worldwide relief. We have a very strong presence in the Lutheran immigration and refugee services. We also have social services. There's an organization called Upbring that has a lot of schools here. I saw a kid in the grocery store the other day with an Upbring t-shirt. I was so excited. I started talking to the mother and the child because it's a Lutheran organization. I'm also free to embrace all the skills and gifts that God has given me. And that includes, science is part of life and technology is part of life. Everything is part of my calling as a Christian, a baptized Christian in this world, as long as it proclaims God's love and God's compassion for creation, for justice, for peace. We're also free then to sometimes go and look at our social order and our tradition and say, okay, let's allow women to be ordained. That is now 50 years ago. Or 11 years ago, our church said, it is okay to allow people who are gay, women and men, when they live in a committed relationship, to allow them to be pastors of congregations. If the congregation so chooses to call a pastor who is gay. And I am also free then to read the Bible in a non-literal way, which is a big difference to evangelical churches, to go back to our earlier conversation there.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Reverend Karin. It sounds like God is someone to rely on and who gives you direction and gives you like the purpose of why you're living your life.
Absolutely.
You always turn back to.
Right. Right. And I'm kind of safely cradled in that promise of new life and this free gift.
That's wonderful. And that reminds me a little bit, even in Islam, that's something that you can always turn back to God. Like even it doesn't matter what you did or what's going on, because his mercy overcomes all of that.
Yes, very much so.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you so much for joining us for this Faith 101 series. For all the audience, just to remind you, Faith 101 is going to be a series of 20-minute live videos on Tuesdays at 11 a.m. with different faith leaders. Because in the Muslim community, a lot of times we know about Christianity or Judaism or different religions generally, but we don't always know about the different denominations underneath. So we're taking some time to get to know our friends and our neighbors and how they worship and what things are important to them. So please join us next week as well. If you all have any questions, feel free to write them in. Thank you again, Karin, for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you. And I wanted to say, if somebody wanted to send me more questions or anything that we didn't cover, look me up on the internet and you'll find me pretty easily.
Okay. Sounds good. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast.
All right.
All right. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.